Hello and welcome back to AP World History and Modern. Today we're going to begin it actually might be our fourth day on the Columbian Exchange, global implications. So, yeah, pretty sure it's day 4. All right, interactions between humans and the environment. Today we're going to be working on a little contextualization and some claim development, and we're looking at being able to explain I guess today we're focusing primarily on the effects of the Columbian Exchange on the Eastern and Western hemispheres. All right, so once again, it's our last day. We're going to be looking at the encounter or the colonization or the origins of the colonization of the Americas or the Columbian Exchange, as it is often referred. All right, so just as a quick reminder, the Columbian Exchange refers to the widespread transfer of animals, diseases, plants, culture, technology, between the Afro-Eurasian trade networks, interaction zone, and the Americas. Right, so that isolation comes to an end. And so when we look at this process, right, it's vast, right, in what we reference, and from both directions, right, and there's going to be implications that go both ways. All right, so this is just a reminder from yesterday, some of the possible categories of analysis that I received in my homework, right, and in which documents kind of paired up with these categories of analysis. All right, so in class today, we started by looking at this document, and we wrote a 3-sentence contextualization, right, to this. So just before we get up and running on this, just want to remind you what contextualization means. All right, so let me go ahead and write this down for you, I guess. So, contextualization. Zoom in. All right. All right, so what are we doing when we are looking at contextualization? We are looking to describe the broader historical context. All right, looking to describe the broader historical context. All right, so things like historical events. All right, things like historical events. Things like historical developments, or things like historical processes. Processes, maybe. All right, so you're looking to do really just one of these 3 things, but you could do more than just one. Right? So you're not limited to just doing one. So, but you're looking to do at least one of these things. Right? You're looking to do at least one of these things. And put my little stapler down. It'll stop sliding. There we go. Right, and looking to do one of these things for before the time period that we're looking at. Right, before the time period that we're focusing in on, could also be during or after, right? But recommend before. It is, I don't know anyone who reads who would tell you that it is not easier to do contextualization for before. So everything I've ever heard recommends doing try to contextualize before. That said, you can also do during. Pretty sure I actually gave you an example when we were looking at the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean the other day. I gave you a during. Right, so but before is what's recommended. Right. So what happened? What historical event happened before the event that we're looking at? What historical development happened before the event that we're looking at? What historical process happened before the event that we're looking at? And we're really looking for a solid 3 sentences if you can. All right. So a solid 3 sentences if that is possible. All right. So we're looking to contextualize this document here. All right, so in the course of the 5th year, 1519, the terrible pestilence began. First there was a cough, then blood. The number of deaths at this time was truly terrible. In 1520, the pestilence spread. Truly the number of deaths amongst the people was terrible, and that people could not escape from the pestilence. All right, so if I were to ask which pestilence is being referenced here, go ahead and think for a second. Right, and hopefully you're able to identify that as smallpox, right? So 1521, right? My father died. The elders and the priests died alike from the pestilence. Half of the people threw themselves into ravines and escaped it. The oldest son of the king died at the same time, as well as his young brothers. Thus, our people became poor. 1521, the Spanish arrived in our country and destroyed our people. The Spanish conquered all of the towns. All right, so this the arrival of the disease predates the arrival of the Spanish. All right, so what does that tell you? 1542, Dominican friars arrived from Mexico and they taught us the doctrine of Christ in our language. Until that time, we'd been ignorant of the word and the commandments of God. In 1560, the pestilence that had formerly raged among the people returned again. It was truly terrible when this death was sent among us by the great God. Many families disappeared. All here were soon attacked, and I was also attacked with this disease. And this comes from a historical chronicle, edited by different members of the Maya political elite, 1571, towards the turn of the 1600s, 1604. All right, so how would you contextualize this? All right, so stop and think for a minute. How would you contextualize this? What would you say? What would you what historical process? All right, let me just kind of bring this up. What historical event, development, or process that occurred before, let's say, the earliest date on that sheet is 1519. What happened before 1519 that would have contributed to what you just read about? All right, so think about that and then try to write down your 3 sentences. I would appreciate seeing that upon your return. All right, or you can email it. And I think I'm projecting this to you, but I'm not. 1519, right? What event happened before 1519 that would have help us make sense out of what we just read? All right. So go ahead and do that, and when you're done, right, we'll move on. Some kind of sample ideas that most students got. Generally fall into kind of one of these 3 categories. One is new maritime technologies promote long distance travel. New connection, of the 2 hemispheres and the exchanges of new diseases, specifically as a result of the Columbian exchange there, right? All right, and then the long period of isolation in the Americas, something to do with the fact that there was, domesticated animals in the Eastern Hemisphere, and many of the diseases that become endemic within European, African, and Asian societies kind of make that jump from domesticated animals. Kind of be careful with this one though. So the reason why I say be careful is there were a number of students who actually kind of used domesticated animals as their example today, saying that domestic animals were brought over, and then that's what gave the Amerindians or Native American groups the disease, like smallpox. And I guess my level of expertise on this topic is limited, but I am not familiar with that becoming a major issue. The reason I say this is because I've read a kind of decent amount about the eradication of smallpox, and what I have read was that while smallpox may have originated from a pig, right, from a domesticated animal, it does not, as a disease, commonly have animal reservoirs for it, meaning that the virus, does not jump from humans to animals and back from animals to humans freely. There are some diseases that do, right? So, I guess a topical one, that is around today, is known for its animal reservoirs, right? So, but smallpox was able to be eradicated, right? And smallpox does come up a couple times in this class. Once it comes up now, obviously, but also with Edward Jenner and in the development of the smallpox vaccine, you know, and then we eradicate it, right? So you know, none of you as my students would have taken the smallpox vaccine. My older brother did, but I did not. Right, so they stopped vaccinating in like 1973 in the United States. I think that was kind of the year they cut off the vaccines. So people born before 1973 have been vaccinated in the United States for smallpox. People born after that have not, right? Minus travels and whatnot. All right. So that's basically kind of what we talked about in class real quick, and then we moved on to a different activity, right? So specifically, we are looking at, right? We're kind of getting prepped for our LEQ and kind of looking at this, right, as a prompt, and just to just kind of go over a little bit what we're going to do today. We're looking to answer this prompt, right? We're going to come up with some ways to answer or address the topic of this prompt, develop an argument that evaluates how Columbian exchange affected peoples in Afro-Eurasia in this time period. Right. So what we're focusing on today doing is coming up with categories of analysis. Right? We seem to do this all the time. Right? Category of analysis. Right? And just as a reminder, right, what I would recommend doing is maybe looking at your Friday homework where Strayer talks about the implications of the Columbian exchange on China. In today's homework where he talks about the same, but for Africa. Right? And if I were you, I'd take like a fact from your homework or a piece of evidence, right? And I would think of trying to go one level of specificity, right, or one level of less specificity up, right? Something a little more broad, right, and making that your category of analysis. But also keep in mind that we also want to be more specific than a theme word. Right? We do not want theme words, or we also really don't want prompt words. Right? Words from the prompt itself. Right. So, what does theme words mean? Just as a reminder, governance, politics, economic, technological, social, cultural, those kinds of words, right? Let's keep them out of your categories of analysis. And as far as prompt words here, let's keep Afro-Eurasia out of it. Let's keep Columbian exchange out of it. All right. So we need to be more specific than the prompt in order to answer the prompt. All right. So let's kind of keep in mind We're looking for that little sweet spot, right? In between theme words and prompt words, and in between facts. All right. So that being said, why don't you take a moment and think about, you can look at your homework and and try to come up with something. All right. So come up with a category of analysis for this prompt. In class, I did give an example, right, of something you might be able to do. So take something like, looking at the demographic changes in Africa that resulted in the slave trade. So let's kind of look at a couple facts. A couple facts are, right, when you look at the population, right? So population slowed Africa's growth, population growth, at a time, but did not result in the kind of population collapse that occurred in the Americas. So, right, when we talk about the Americas between 1500 and 1600, you have a demographic population collapse that takes place. So, estimates sometimes are as high as 100 million people living in the Americas. And then the percentage of the population that dies, it ranges from 50 to 60% up to 90% plus. That is a demographic collapse. All right. So kind of no matter where the percentage is, that those percentages are massively high. And a lot of it has to do with smallpox, but also a whole bunch of the other diseases, as well as famine and conflict and chaos that could have only, one can only imagine how chaotic it would have been in the result of this. So Africa, right? Africa's growth simply slows or hits a plateau from 1600, up until 1900. So if we're looking at population kind of demographics by continent from 1600 to 1900, just for starters, the population of the Americas would have been at a low, right? So that demographic collapse would have happened in 1600. You would have seen a stabilization in the decades before 1600, so that by the time you get to 1600 and on, it's going to be a population growth. All right. So that said, sub-Saharan Africa represented about 18% of the world's population in 1600. That means about 1 in every 5 people on planet Earth lived in sub-Saharan Africa, but only 6% in 1900. So what does that mean? That means, from 1600 to 1900, Africa's population stagnated, while the population in the Americas, Europe, South Asia, East Asia, all increased dramatically. All right. So we see the overall share of world population, dropping. Of course, this will change after 1945. We'll talk about, we'll talk about demographics in sub-Saharan Africa. Today it is the fastest growing place on planet Earth, and and we'll look at the implications of that later on. All right, economics, right? So how could you put that into a category of analysis, right? That might be kind of one. This might be one topic you might be able to come up with a category of analysis, and then try to something that you could support with this evidence. All right. Slave trade stimulated little positive change in Africa because those Africans who benefited most from the traffic and people were not investing in the productive capacities of African societies. No technological breakthroughs, agriculture industry increased the wealth available to African societies. Within governance, right, we're seeing a general decentralization. Larger kingdoms such as Congo and Oyo slowly disintegrated as access to the trading opportunities of firearms enabled outlying regions. Right? So can we turn that fact into a category of analysis, or the social role of women? Right, that African women were almost everywhere active farmers with responsibility for planting, weeding, and harvesting, in addition to food preparation and childcare. Men cleared the land, built houses, herded the cattle, and in some cases assisted with field work. Women were expected to feed their families and were also usually allocated their own fields for that purpose. Many were also involved in local trading activity. On the Ivory Coast, women had traditionally grown cotton for their families' clothing. In Cameroon, estimated the women's working hours to be 46 a week. And though clearly subordinate to men, African women nevertheless had a measure of economic autonomy. All right, so is there any way you can use that as a category of analysis that could be supported with evidence here? Right? So be thinking about that. Right? Be thinking about that as you know, as an angle. All right. All right. So here's a quick little document about chattel slavery, which we've talked about earlier. As of the 1580s, slaves constituted well over half the voyages to the New World. By 1700, three-quarters, and by 1820, 90%. Truly, the settlement in the Americas would not have been possible without black slaves, who constituted fully 77% of those who crossed the Atlantic before 1820. Only after the mid 19th century, when the institution was finally outlawed, did the majority of immigrants have white skin. This is by William Bernstein, A Splendid Exchange, How Trade Shaped the World. All right, we have another document here doing a comparison between Incan agricultural techniques. I guess what you're seeing here is mita, as opposed to the harvesting of the same crop. So both of these are potatoes. All right. So for your comparison, also if you're talking about the Columbian exchange, don't forget about the Americas and silver, and we've already talked about this, but Potosi. Right, so Potosi is in modern day Bolivia, so that Potosi walking the silver down to Lima, and then making that run up to Acapulco, and then the Acapulco to Manila run on these Spanish Manila galleons. All right, and so just as a reminder, the silver mines of Potosi is another one of these kind of key characteristics that that is contextually right connected to the Columbian exchange, I think we used it contextually. Excuse me, when we talked about the introduction of the Spanish into the Indian Ocean Trade Network via Manila. All right, and of course this was how they got into the market. All right. All right, but I think we've already talked about all this. We watched that short video already. All right, so all kinds of effects. Of course, the price revolution is going to have an impact on China. It's going to have, in the late 1500s, and it's also going to cause that inflation crisis in the Ottoman Empire as well. All right, so that price revolution will have global implications to it. All right. All right, so I guess we're not going to draw this today. Maybe we'll get around to that tomorrow. Right, but we will spend some time on this. This is looking at the colonial settlements, which is probably going to get into tomorrow. All right, that's probably it for today. All right, and what do we see here? Oh, yes, some classes I did go over this the other day when we were talking about syncretism, right? And but so Christianity, indigenous Mesoamerican cultures. 1535, the Bishop of Mexico proudly claimed that he destroyed 500 pagan shrines and 20,000 idols during the 17th and early 18th century. Church authorities in the Andean region periodically launched movements of extirpation designed to fatally undermine native religions. They destroyed religious images and ritual objects, publicly urinated on native idols, desecrated these remains of ancestors, held religious trials, and processions of shame aimed at humiliating offenders and flogged idlers. All right, so, and of course, we will see right up until the 1820s, the Inquisition in Latin America, right? The Latin American Inquisition, which is being referenced here. Right? The held religious trials. That's referring to the Latin American Inquisition. All right, that is all for today, and we do have some kind of population demographic breakdown. We do see that rise, right? Starting to take off here. All right, but that is all for today. Sapriati.